an amazing accomplishment and achievement that is now nearly 20 years old, 2004. And in that, so much has changed about how we think about behavioral health. Who are those who need services the most? How do we make sure that we're not just speaking about mental health, but also adding that strong addiction component, the substance use disorder piece? So a lot to really modernize and update. As it relates to the really well-recognized intersection between homelessness and housing instability and insecurity and certain severe behavioral health conditions, one of the proposals that the governor talked about was dedicating 30% of the local MHSA dollars to housing solutions for those with severe behavioral health conditions. And this is not just one-time money, but ongoing funding that we hope and expect are going to help us to scale the housing solutions that are needed to help individuals with severe behavioral health conditions who are living in a lot of different environments, whether it's encampments or cars or shelters or unstable housing situations, to find that housing stability and to wrap around that now housed individual with a whole suite of wonderful behavioral health services that we know are evidence-based and work. So we, in the vein of modernizing, it's a real deep recognition of this nexus between homelessness and severe behavioral health. We know that when we review the point in time count numbers on an annual basis, that we look at those who are experiencing and designated as chronically homeless, and many of those individuals have deep needs in the behavioral health space. So we see this proposal as modernizing a great number of things, but also really helping us focus and prioritize once again on those with the most severe behavioral health conditions who also are experiencing in large numbers unsheltered homelessness. Related to this, although different, now 2 budgets ago, we had $1.5 billion for behavioral health bridge housing. This money was meant to go directly to counties to help support individuals who are in need of immediate housing solutions, to find those solutions, to pay for rent, to help identify other situations that help somebody move from an encampment or other unsheltered conditions into place housing. And those dollars were put out, an RFP for those dollars went out in April, and we are just a few days away. Next month, we will be making the first set of awards, nearly 900 million of that $1.5 billion. Last programmatic update that I wanted to give, and I know many people on the council, as well as who are joining as part of the public, have tracked our journey with the CARE Act, both its passage and now its implementation. We are now just months away from cohort 1 counties that represent about 25% of the state's population from going live with the CARE pathway in October. And then soon after that, before the end of the year, Los Angeles County implementing their CARE Act pathway in December. So by the end of the year, roughly 50% of California's population in 8 counties, the largest counties we have in the state, implementing CARE Act pathway. It has been really a pretty tremendous effort to watch. Number of statewide cohort 1 meetings, a lot of one-on-one county interaction with our TA team at the state, resources provided to local government to begin preparing for implementation, the development of all of the policy procedures forums at the court level, and our tremendous partners at through the courts. So a lot of work being done in preparation for that October 1st launch. wherein we hope at an upcoming meeting we're able to share some of the successes and some of the early lessons and challenges that we're working the way through. My last comment before turning it over to Secretary Castro Ramirez is we are also looking forward to next month in June, the release of a study by our partners at UCSF and the work that they did to really look at some of the drivers, the precipitants of homelessness. This is a concept that originated in the state family. We asked the question, it's now a few years ago, COVID and some other challenges made it hard to complete the study, but it is soon to be released, and I think we'll have some important findings for a number of us to think through, pay attention to, and hopefully inform our work moving forward. So look forward to sharing that with a number of you in the weeks to come. So with that, just really appreciate the time to update on these important issues. And I will, with that, turn it to you, Secretary Castro Ramirez. And then after that, also, Corinne, thank you for filling in for me for the rest of the meeting.
Terrific. Thank you, Secretary Galley. Very much appreciate your leadership and, of course, the incredible partnership that HHS and all of its departments continues to provide, not only at the state level, but working in close partnership with cities and counties. And so very much also understand that this is a very busy time of the year for all of us as we get close to the end of the budget, this current budget cycle, and also as negotiations continue in terms of the next budget cycle. And so appreciate the presence of council members today and the incredible work that you're continuing to lead and provide. Secretary Sin, welcome. Welcome to the California Interagency Council on Homelessness. We're excited to have you on board and look forward to meeting you in person. Definitely want to also acknowledge the great leadership and involvement and engagement from Undersecretary Russell Atterbury. Has been very involved and engaged, and I look forward to continuing that work together. Just a few thoughts and a few points that I'd like to share as we jump into today's agenda. As you know, today we will be spending time looking at the action plan that was updated and adopted by this council. The action plan very much is the roadmap that enables us to connect the work that is happening across state government, state entities with a focus on 5 areas of focus. And I recognize that there's a lot in that action plan, but there's a lot of good progress that is being made. And for those of you that have not had an opportunity to look at to read through the detailed update reports that are included in the board packet, I highly encourage you to do so. There's a lot of activity that is taking place, all with the focus of continuing our collective efforts to prevent, address, and end homelessness. And speaking of commitment and the work that is being done at the state level, of course, we can't do this without the partnership of local leaders, including our 2 council members who have joined us today, Tamika and Veronica. Thank you for your leadership and service on this council. I had an opportunity just about a month ago to be in LA with HOPIX, the city of LA, the county, and several other providers. The state has been piloting a program called Mobile Homeless Connect. It's really an opportunity for the state to deliver services close to the people that require these services. And in this case, it's bringing services to individuals that are experiencing homelessness. And these are services from DMV, being able to speak with a DMV worker and being able to process the application to obtain a California ID, to also connecting to vital benefits and services. And Veronica, I just wanted to express my appreciation to you and to your entire team for hosting a very large contingent of state colleagues who were on the ground meeting directly with people and making the connection to housing, to services and support. We look forward to, of course, at the right time, circling back with the council to provide a summary of lessons learned and how we intend to potentially make this resource available to other communities. The third point that I just wanted to bring to the council today is just a reminder, right? The work that we do is in service to others. And so earlier in the month of May, the first week of May, as you all know, is dedicated to Public Service Recognition Week, an opportunity for us to lift up the work that is happening across the federal, state, and local level when it comes to housing and homelessness. I think you all can attest to the incredible work that your colleagues and staff members are carrying out every single day. I just wanted to take an opportunity here to acknowledge the work of the Cal ICH staff that provides support to this council, that ensures that each of you have an opportunity to weigh in not only on the action plan and the agenda, but also to receive the information necessary to be effective council members and to be prepared. So thank you to Dakshika, to Megan, to Cody, and everyone that is part of the Cal ICH staff that ensures that we're well prepared for these council meetings. The final point here that I'd like to share with you all is with regard to the state's recent engagement and commitment to be a participant within the federal government, the All Inside initiative. I think you all hopefully will recall that Helene Snyder, who's joining us today from the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, during our last meeting, provided an overview of the federal framework to address homelessness across the country, with a focus on a 25% reduction in the next 2 years. As part of that initiative, the federal government, the Biden-Harris administration, has made a commitment to partner with state and local jurisdictions. We were selected and asked to be a participant, selected because of our meaningful actions, the programs at scale that we are championing and leading. And so we're very pleased that the governor has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Biden-Harris administration through the US ICH Council, and will be participating along with 5 other cities in this first cohort. We're just beginning to get started, and so we hope to be able to provide more details at the next council meeting in terms of the scope of the engagement. But I will say that it is a 2-year pilot program, and the state has decided to focus on accelerating our efforts with a focus on 3 key populations: veterans who are experiencing homelessness, veterans and their families, youth, and also older adults. And so, of course, there's a lot of good work that is happening here in the state, and look forward to working with several of you as we engage. And Helene, thank you for joining us today. I know that on the agenda, you'll have an opportunity to take us into a deeper conversation about the state's engagement and All Inside. And then just finally, as Secretary Galley mentioned, we do have a new member on the Cal ICH team, and she comes to us with tremendous experience and expertise. She's our new executive officer, Megan Marshall. I think some of you have had an opportunity to meet her, and she's has almost 20 years of experience in public service, working primarily at the county level in health and human services, housing and homelessness. And we're delighted that she has hit the ground running. There's a lot happening at Cal ICH, as you all know, and we're thrilled to have you, Megan, leading the Cal ICH day-to-day operations, and also providing the leadership and support to this council. So with that, I will turn it over to Cody, or turn it over to you, Megan, to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Secretary. So yes, with that, I just want to say I genuinely look forward to developing close relationships with each one of the council member agencies, departments, certainly our stakeholders at the local level, and supporting the good work that we all hope to accomplish. So I'll keep my remarks very short and pass it back to Giselle so she can move us along in our agenda.
All right, thank you, everybody. We'll move on to the next agenda item. This is agenda item 4, the consent calendar. The consent calendar is for regular or non-controversial items that need to be approved by the council, where we do not expect any discussion from the council. We have one item, the adoption of the February 27th council meeting. Before proceeding, since this is an action item, we will now accept public comment. Please keep comments to the items on the consent calendar only. If your comment is not related to the consent calendar, there will be time for general public comment at the end of this meeting. If you're connected through Zoom, please select the raised hand icon in the meeting window of your computer and we will unmute you. For those joining us by telephone, you may press *9 to indicate that you'd like to comment. Once I speak on you, you'll be instructed to unmute yourself. And you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment. I'll give it a few seconds to check for hands before proceeding to a vote. All right, we'll move on to a vote. All right, do we have a motion from council members to adopt the meeting summary?
Move to adopt the meeting summary.
Thank you. Would anybody like to second?
Second, Joe.
Thank you. As I call the roll, you may vote aye or yes to approve. You may also vote nay or abstain. All right, I'll call the roll. Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez. I believe you might be on mute. Secretary, I don't think we can hear you.
Having problems with the mouse here, but yes.
Thank you. Secretary Mark Galley. Oh, I don't think he could hear you either.
He might have stepped away already, so
Okay,
as he's
no problem. Tomas Aragon.
Rohan is designee, yes.
Oh, thank you. Stephanie Clendenin.
Aye.
JC Cooper, if you are present. Okay. Susan Damaris.
Aye.
Kim Johnson.
Aye.
Tina Johnson Hall.
Aye.
Veronica Lewis.
Aye.
Jeff McCumber.
Aye.
William McGee.
Abstain.
Tamika Moss.
Aye.
Tim Rainey.
Aye.
Nancy Robles.
Aye.
Rebecca Ruano Shaughnessy, if you're present.
Yes, aye.
Thank you. Lindsay Sin,
Abstain.
Tony Tavares,
Aye.
Gustavo Velasquez,
Aye.
Nancy Ward,
Aye.
and Joe Xavier.
Aye.
Thank you. We have 6 votes for. The motion passes. The meeting summary is approved. I'm going to now pass it to our Deputy Secretary of Homelessness, Dakshika Wikrama, and our Deputy Secretary for Policy and Strategic Planning, Corinne Buchanan, to provide a summary of the investments in the May revise of the budget.
Thank you, Giselle. Just a very high-level summary of what was in the governor's May revised budget. As you know, Governor Newsom's revised budget contends with a $32 billion shortfall. But in spite of this difficult budget picture, the governor's May revision maintained previously committed funds to help our local partners prevent and address homelessness. So this included the previously committed $1 billion for a 5th round of homeless housing assistance and prevention, also known as HAP program, and that will provide 5-year allocations of flexible grants to all 58 counties, all 44 continuum of care regions in California, and the 14 large cities, as well as a set aside for federally recognized California tribes. In addition, the May budget revision maintained the previously committed $400 million for a 3rd round of competitive 4-year encampment resolution grants, which will help jurisdictions engage unsheltered residents living in their communities and connect them to housing and supportive services. The May budget revision also continued to make affordable housing a priority, maintaining nearly 90% of the total funding that was allocated last year. The state, in fact, issued a $736 million NOFA for a 3rd round of HomeKey and just announced a $567 million SuperNOFA for multifamily affordable housing. As you may have heard, the administration is looking to work closely with the legislature to expand and build on the existing accountability measures that we have already, to continue strengthening regional coordination across sectors and achieve greater collective impact. This includes thinking about how local governments in a particular region can continue to work together and build on their respective roles and responsibilities and achieve collective outcomes, because the ultimate goal is the creation of more affordable housing and more solid connections to supportive services, health and behavioral health services, because as you heard the secretary mention, we really want to make sure that we, the state, are supporting local partners to ensure unhoused Californians are able to access not only stable housing, but also the community-based services they need to lead lives of dignity and well-being. So we are very grateful for the maintenance of all the allocations that had been previously committed to. And now for more details related to health and behavioral health funding, I'm going to turn it over to my counterpart from Cal HHS, Corinne Buchanan.
Great. Hi, folks. Corinne Buchanan. I serve as a Deputy Secretary for Policy and Strategic Planning with the California Health and Human Services Agency. So you might recall that Dakshika and I made presentations at our last meeting on the governor's January budget. So today I'll just provide a couple of updates where there are changes in the May revise. And I'll just start by saying that, as I shared in our last meeting, building on previous years, the focus of this year's budget investments in Cal HHS around homelessness are focused on people who have complex behavioral health conditions. So the first is, though not a homelessness funding stream, is that I think is worth lifting up for you all, is the funding for the CARE Act implementation, which the Secretary mentioned in his opening remarks, which creates a new pathway to deliver both mental health and substance use disorder services to the most severely impaired Californians. who all too often suffer in homelessness or incarceration or institutionalization without access to community-based care. And the CARE Act moves care and support upstream, so providing those most vulnerable Californians with access to those services earlier. Because many of those individuals who we expect to be served by the CARE Act may be experiencing homelessness, ensuring that housing is a part of the care plan is baked into the model. So 7 counties will begin serving individuals in October of this year, with LA joining in December, which is a new addition since the last time we gave an update, Los Angeles joining a bit early. And the remaining counties will be launching in December of 2024. Funding for startup costs and planning for the counties and the courts was included in the 2020 Budget Act. And this year's budget includes funding for things like county administrative costs, funding for the courts, as well as funding for legal representation for those individuals who will flow through the CARE Act process. The May revision includes additional investments to support the implementation of the CARE Act in counties, in courts, and as I said, the legal representation, to account for both the addition of Los Angeles to the launch this upcoming fiscal year, as well as updated cost estimates for especially additional funds to counties to support admin. So the May revision includes just over 1.28 million in general fund in 23-24, and then it goes up each year as the program expands to other parts of the state, with an annual funding ultimately of 290 million in 26-27 and thereafter for our funding that will flow through the Department of Healthcare Services to counties and through the judicial branch to implement the program. And then the second item that I'll lift up, which the Secretary also lifted up in the opening remarks, is the Department of Healthcare Services recently launched Behavioral Health Bridge Housing Program, which provides 1.5 billion in funding administered by the Department of Healthcare Services to counties to address the immediate housing needs of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness who have serious behavioral health conditions, by providing housing through interim housing settings, through rental subsidies, through board and care settings. And I'll note that these funds will also prioritize those individuals who are engaged through the CARE Act. In April, the RFA was released for almost 2 billion in funding through the first round. And the January budget had a delay of some of those funds, but the May revision includes 500 million in one-time mental health services funds in 23-24 in lieu of general fund for Behavioral Health Bridge Housing Program, which effectively eliminates the governor's proposed delay in those funds. So good news. And the May revision does also shift some of those general funds to out fiscal years, reflecting updates in programmatic timelines. So those are the updates there. Happy to share that those funds, the full total amount of 1.5 billion is maintained. And with that, I will pass it back to Cody. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you both for that. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to move to the next agenda item. And we're really excited about this one because, as you all know, we have been going through the process of updating the action plan to add additional or expanded activities for the coming fiscal year. We've met with each of you to discuss these activities, and simultaneously, we have been holding public input sessions to get feedback from a variety of groups involved in homelessness policy across the state. So we're going to present more details about our process and the feedback we received, but I just want to flag that this agenda item is primarily meant to be a discussion among you all. As you'll see, we've identified areas of the action plan that we think the council could strengthen based on the feedback that we've received. And we have set up discussions around each of these areas for us to participate in today. So we really appreciate all of you for your thoughtfulness and engagement during this time. And to get us started, I'm very happy to introduce my colleague, Nicole Sakihara, who is our Cal-ICH Action Plan Specialist, to go over what we've done to update the plan thus far.
Thanks, Cody, and good afternoon, everybody. Like Cody said, I'm just going to kick us off by quickly reviewing the action plan and our update process for this year. Next slide, please. So this will be the third iteration of the action plan since its initial adoption in 2021. While activities have changed, one thing that hasn't is the focus of the action plan and the need for increased state leadership through this council to help providers on the ground do the work to prevent and end homelessness in their communities. That takes coordination and dedication to making the changes needed across all state-funded programs through the partnerships that we create here on the council. Next slide, please. The purpose of the action plan, including through this year's update, is to develop understanding of the various funding and programs that each department administers in order to identify opportunities for collaboration and partnership. The plan is not intended to dictate what should be happening at the local level, nor is it intended to replace any strategic plans that have already been created by communities. Instead, it's really here to serve as a guide or a model for partnership opportunities that can be replicated within local systems of care. Next slide, please. Since its original adoption, the Council and the Action Plan have undergone some changes. In 2022, the Council gained new members, all of which are critical to addressing the homelessness crisis and ultimately necessary in order to prevent and end homelessness in California. With the addition of new departments came additional activities, which was roughly about 80, that helped to significantly expand objectives and activities regarding prevention, and then the intersectionality of health, housing, and human services. Currently, there are over 150 activities in the action plan with ranging timelines. Some are set to expire at the end of fiscal year 22-23, while others will remain ongoing. And next slide, please. So during this year's update, we'll be working with the departments to ensure that all activities related to housing and homelessness are captured within the action plan, which means adding activities or making adjustments to those with ongoing timelines. And that purpose is really to ensure that we have really as an exhaustive list as possible in order to help identify gaps for a comprehensive update in the future. Additionally, the plan's objectives will be updated to reflect the work being done as needed, as well as refining content within other sections of the plan. Next slide, please. So like Cody said, the policy team has been meeting with council member departments since March, in addition to holding public input sessions, tribal input sessions, meetings with entities like the National Alliance to End Homelessness and Housing California, and meetings with local lived experience advisory boards and youth action boards. Today, Cody will be presenting the input that we've received to date, and after this meeting, the policy team will continue to work with departments to address the input we've received and finalize activities based on budgets and any incoming legislation throughout the summer. In September, the council will have an opportunity to discuss and then adopt the updated action plan at its September 7th meeting. Next slide, please. In addition to working with council member departments, the policy team is also working with the advisory committee to brainstorm and create guidance on the following questions. One is, how could the state better align funding and or coordinate across programs to improve their collective impact? And the second is, how can the state best assess its progress on the commitments made in the action plan? The advisory committee will be working in smaller groups to refine the guidance and present it to the council at the September 7th meeting. So before I pass it off to Cody, I'll pause for any questions regarding our process or anything like that. All right, and then I'll pass it to Cody.
Great, thanks, Nicole. All right, so on to this feedback. We're really excited. So I'm gonna briefly give some more information on the feedback that we heard from our input sessions as a way of setting up your all's discussions. Oh, Secretary Castro-Ramirez, hi. Do you have a question?
Yes, Cody, is it possible to remove the deck so that we can see each other during the conversation?
Yes, definitely.
That would be great.
So what I'll do is I'm going to give we have a few more slides with some context about the feedback. And then as we're having the discussion, we'll pull down the slides and I'll put the questions into the chat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we all want to be able to see each other. So yeah, I'll briefly give some more information on the feedback that we heard from our input sessions as a way of sort of setting up your all's discussions. But just at a high level, right? So in April and May, we held a number of public input sessions that included nearly 200 people from a variety of sectors and disciplines. We had general public input sessions, we had tribal listening sessions, we had meetings with lived experience advisory boards and young adult boards, right, among other meetings. In these conversations, we heard a lot of feedback, and Nicole and the others on my team attempted to pull out sort of the relevant messages we heard and summarize them in the memo that we provided you with before this meeting. And I've selected a few of the key themes from these sessions to go over today to help inform these discussions. And likely, you know, none of these will be new to any of you as they are common across all of our departments and agencies. So on the next slide, we'll see just a few of these key pieces of public input. So one piece of feedback that came across during these sessions was the need for a consistent focus on addressing racial disparities and homelessness within state programs, including a focus on the specific needs of tribal communities, which I will talk about on the next slide. We also heard a request for the earnest inclusion of people with lived experience in state level decision-making processes, program design and implementation, and communication strategies. Continuing on the communication front, there was a consistent interest in the state engaging in expanded communications and educational efforts to support effective solutions in local communities. Additionally, there was a lot of discussion around the need for guidance and support around aligning housing strategies with health and behavioral health strategies so that we can really reach vulnerable populations and increase our impact. Last, there were many requests for the state to streamline requirements and processes as much as possible in order to help address administrative challenges communities face in utilizing the state's housing and homelessness funding. So there's a lot more detail on the feedback that we received in these sessions in the memo that we sent you. One additional piece from that memo was that there were specific subpopulations of people experiencing homelessness that were consistently identified as groups requiring increased services and support specific to their needs. This included older adults, people with disabilities, youth, domestic violence survivors and survivors of human trafficking, and people with co-occurring diagnoses. So I really just encourage you all to read through that memo carefully if you haven't already, as we may bring some of those topics back to the council when it comes to further strengthening the action plan. And before moving on to the feedback we heard from tribal communities, I will just say that, you know, many of us are actively working to address these very pieces of feedback, including through many of our activities in the action plan. But, you know, it feels important to lift these up as they indicate a continued need to commit the time and resources to this work. So in regards to themes from our tribal listening sessions, we heard very clearly that while the input from our public listening sessions also applies to tribal communities, there is also unique needs that must be addressed in order to effectively prevent and end homelessness in tribal communities. As part of this, tribal communities expressed facing more barriers and having fewer resources when it comes to addressing homelessness. One important request was for the state to rebuild relationships with tribal communities through respectful, timely, and effective outreach that includes individualized supports. There was a request for more assistance building capacity with streamlined, coordinated, and culturally responsive state supports to assist them in accessing the state funding streams that are being offered. A frequent observation was that, the funding streams that group tribes with other government entities, such as cities, counties, or COCs, are not as accessible as when there are tribal specific funding opportunities. And overall, we just really heard a real desire from our tribal partners to be part of the work to prevent and end homelessness, and an acknowledgement that without the proper support and partnership from the state, people were worried about the cultural future and livelihood of tribes. So the next slide summarizes some of the lessons we learned across all of our input sessions. And just at a very high level, right, stakeholders reported that they perceived a need for more purposeful and visible coordination and collaboration across state entities, robust and wide-reaching communication to help communities understand how to align the variety of resources available to them, and clear leadership from the state to support local community efforts and partnerships, including with tribal communities. So based on all of that feedback, Cal-ICH staff identified 4 areas of the action plan that we think council members can focus on strengthening in today's meeting. So the first of those areas is around the interagency coordination and collaboration expressed in the plan, right? So stakeholders acknowledge that the plan is very effective at listing what we are all doing as individual departments and agencies, but that it is harder sometimes to understand what we're doing as a collective in this work. The second area is around racial equity and tribal engagement, with a call to build robust activities and partnerships in these areas. The third area is an inclusion of people with lived expertise in policymaking and program design. And the fourth area is around communications and public awareness of the state's work, with a focus on clear communication around what the state is doing to prevent and end homelessness, what resources are available, and really best practices for this work. So, as I said before, we're all doing work across these four areas already. You can see on the slide where each of these exists explicitly in the action plan. However, based on the feedback, we know there's more opportunity to strengthen our work in each of these areas. This could include adding new or expanded activities to the plan, identifying strategies for measuring our progress in these areas, requesting input from other council support structures, such as the working groups or advisory committee, among other mechanisms for moving this work forward. So therefore, as part of this agenda item, we're about to sort of facilitate a little discussion around each of these areas. And we'll start, the way that it'll work is that we'll start by letting a few council members share, some brief highlights of work that they're doing in that area already, and then opening it up to others who have ideas for ways that they could strengthen their own work in that area or our work as a group, right? Based on what they've heard from the others that have been participating. So we will do this for each of the four areas in the order I just listed them. And we would love everyone's participation in this discussion, but also don't expect every one of you to answer every single question, right? So just the ones that feel the most relevant to your work or where you have particular questions for other council members based on what you've heard. And the hope is, right, you'll use this discussion, this forum, as a chance to speak with your fellow council members and really learn from them and identify ways that we can all make our work better. So the last thing I will note before we pull down the slides and start the discussion is that, we don't necessarily expect everyone to have fully formed solutions or ideas in this moment, but instead that these discussions allow you to hear what other people are doing and generate ideas about how we each can individually or as a collective strengthen this work. Cal ICH staff will follow up with your staff after this meeting to help identify ways to move forward the ideas that are brought up today. So really just a chance to have some generative conversation. So before I move into the discussions, does anyone have any questions about the information that was just presented? Great. So let's move to the next slide. And so this is what it's going to look like. So within each area, right, we'll start with interagency coordination and collaboration. There's sort of two questions. I will put these in the chat in just a moment. But the first will be to open it up for folks to share relevant examples of coordination and collaboration across state agencies and departments. And then once we get a few of those, we'll open it up to everyone else to say, okay, can you identify opportunities for expanded coordination and collaboration that can be reflected in the plan? So we'll sort of repeat this structure in each of those four areas. So I think we can pull down the slides now and let everyone see each other. Great. And let me quickly put these in the chat so everyone can see them. Sorry for the formatting there. But yeah, we'll start it off. So does anyone have any, or can anyone please share relevant activities around coordination and collaboration across state agencies and departments? And yes, and I'll call on you and try to facilitate between folks, but feel free to, add in if you have things that you hear that spark ideas. So Director Johnson.
Sure. Thanks, Cody. And just really want to appreciate the team for all of the engagement on getting our input on this and broader with communities and tribes, et cetera. So thanks for those efforts. I'd lift up a couple of things. One, I would say that I just really want to acknowledge and appreciate that the council's talked a lot about the integration of health and housing. And that's becoming, I think, more common in the way all of us talk about the critical pieces there. But I'd also just say, I think we need to further include kind of the services, the social services in that. So it's health, it's housing, and it's integration of social services that we know are producing the greatest outcomes. And we're certainly experiencing that in the programs that we have the privilege to administer at the Department of Social Services that have those connections and prongs intentionally there. I also just want to say that unfortunately and fortunately, we're having to get better at disaster response and recovery. And want to acknowledge just a tremendous partnership with several different departments on this and agencies on this council that have really been intentional about thinking about particularly the disaster unsheltered populations and how within a disaster we're being intentionally and focused in communities. And I think we met with more than a dozen communities in the floods that occurred at the beginning of the year. Really thinking about those strategies together and identifying any other resources and solutions and unmet needs that the state could be supporting. So I want to acknowledge and recognize that we've kind of lifted up this population in disaster, but also want to acknowledge that there's more to be done, both in terms of the immediate supports and sheltering, but also post and recovery and how we can maximize opportunities for housing and supportive services in this space. So those are two that I want to lift up in this section. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Xavier.
Yeah, thank you, Cody. First, and also thank you to all of you for the engagement that we have had, providing the feedback. A couple of things that I would lift up that we're working on here are really around the systems integration first, and with our partners in the correctional system and the state hospitals. And that's really changing our thinking and going upstream, engaging individuals with disabilities who are in those institutions and who will be exiting those institutions to really help them become better prepared for employment when they exit. As we know, employment is both prevention, intervention, and certainly recovery. And I think a good job goes a very long way to changing individual circumstances. And so that's a shift that we have been making over the last couple of years. And we're now in a couple of prisons with staff embedded, delivering services before individuals exit. We're working with Stephanie and her team at the Napa State Hospital, and we'll continue to expand that kind of work, not just within those systems, but in other systems. So upstream, a whole person approach. The other thing that we're looking to advance is both recruiting and screening individuals with lived experience into the boards and committees that we have advising us specifically as a department. So we're in the process of doing that. Of course, that is something that's going to take a bit of time because one, is going to be voluntary. We don't have a statutory mandate for individuals to disclose. And two, we're dealing, of course, with term limits and a myriad of other requirements that each of those boards and committees have for membership and composition, but it is definitely an effort that we're making to bring that lived experience into the conversations and informing the work that we're doing. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Director Tavares.
Yeah, thank you very much. First, I just want to thank this entire committee, the LICH committee, on the work that this group is doing in the individual agencies. I will say Caltrans works with many of you and a lot of our local and regional partners out there throughout the state when it comes to our priority populations and people experiencing homelessness on the state right of way. And we rely very heavily on our city and continuum of care partners to provide outreach, to provide social services and other services to these individuals. I will say with the introduction of the ARF funding grants, that's produced a more robust partnership between the state, the county, and city governments. It's allowed us all to prioritize our outreach, our services, and eventually the removals of some of these encampments so that we can transition these individuals into safer environments. Right now, Caltrans is looking also to refocus our lens a bit to include points of contact for communities that are willing to collaborate and coordinate outreach and who offer social services and housing options as well. And so we would love to explore this opportunity with CalICH and perhaps launch a pilot together.
Great, thank you for that. Councilmember McGee.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for this conversation, and to the other council members, but as well as the community that is joining in this conversation. So Cody and team, just thinking about the question about identifying opportunities, and I appreciate what I heard Council Member Johnson state about disaster coordination, because at the California Department of Education, our superintendent had the foresight to pull all of our divisions together to talk just about that disaster preparedness. And so we're not being only responsive, but also trying to be proactive. So I'm taking notes, and I'm gonna definitely connect with you, Councilman Johnson. What I would like to also offer from the lens of the Department of Education, since we support LEAs, local educational agencies, that generally serve children and families from pre-kindergarten all the way through adult, is just the connection that we have. So one of the updates that we offer to you all as council members is one of our divisions coordinates a newsletter quarterly that's targeted to the pre-kindergarten through third grade families. So if you have resources or you just want to connect, please contact us. And I believe that would be a great opportunity for us to expand coordination and collaboration. The other thing that I would state is my team in our integrated student support office that supports our unhoused children. They support our foster youth children, as well as our American Indian or Native American children. They coordinated a beautiful homeless education conference that was attended by our LEAs throughout the state of California. So that would be another opportunity, I believe, for us to collaborate. So the next time that we do have that conference, I'll ask our team to ensure that they give the information to Cody, so then we can get it to the other council members, and then you all definitely attend, set up tables, however we can support our unhoused population. And then I think the last thing I'll end on is another opportunity for coordination. Unfortunately, children who are unhoused generally fall under the category of what we call Title I, or they're low income or they're low performing. And so our department will be hosting a Title I conference. I want to tell you guys it's in March of 2024. So again, another opportunity for collaboration. We will definitely get that information, so then you all can come out, see what we're doing. We can learn from you all, as well as just pass that information out to the LEA. So I appreciate the conversation and this opportunity for us to really throw out what we're doing so we can strengthen those areas of collaboration and coordination.
Great, thank you, Councilmember McGee. And yeah, just as a call out, obviously continue to share relevant activities around coordination and collaboration as you have them, but feel free to move to, of course, identifying additional opportunities for that expanded coordination and collaboration. So don't feel the need to stick to just one of those questions. Councilmember Velasquez.
I think Councilmember Ward had her hand up first.
Thank you, sir. Well, what I wanted to just lift up really is how humble Council Member Johnson is about her efforts in disaster assistance. And it's wonderful to hear both Council Member Johnson and McGee talk about disaster assistance, because I think a lot of times we see disasters on the news and hear about the impacts, certainly to marginalized communities. But what we don't really understand or amplify enough is how much it impacts already those people that are unhoused. And during this last series of winter storms, Cal OES and Health and Human Services, along with Corinne Buchanan, who was on earlier, I hope she's still on, co-chaired what was called the Priorities Population Task Force. And it was a combination of more than 20 state agencies that came together to talk about the resources and the services that could be provided to these communities, including the unhoused, who really are never talked about in terms of having impacts to disaster services. So I just want to thank them for all of their efforts, and it was a huge effort, and we're still today utilizing that task force to bring in community-based organizations still for housing services and resources across probably 12 or 14 counties across the state of California. So I wanted just to uplift their participation and their leadership in this area. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And now Councilmember Velasquez.
Okay, thank you, Cody. So let me highlight a couple of examples of recent coordination, and then I'll talk about opportunities. The first on recent coordination, when the governor came into office, he issued an executive order to identify excess state land in order to prioritize the creation of affordable housing, deeply affordable housing, and housing for the chronically homeless. And I just want to highlight that because it's been a great partnership with many state agencies and departments, notably CalSTA and CalSTRAN. And working with the Department of General Services, we have already made available, first catalog all of these excess sites across the state, but now made available for competitive bidding many of these sites. There is a pipeline of more than 6,000 units of affordable housing, of which almost a third will be designated for people that have experienced homelessness. So I do want to say that that's been a very important coordination between my department, DGS, and many of the members in this council. The other is HCD is very focused on our efforts to hold local jurisdictions accountable for not complying with the state law. And within the last year or so, we have seen an increasing number of cases in our housing accountability unit where local jurisdictions want to deny projects that fund housing for the homeless, or issues where housing that provides services to the homeless populations, they want to sort of restrict uses. We recently had an instance in a city not far away from the capital here, Sacramento, where we had to work with the Office of the Attorney General to bring some much stronger enforcement action given the denial of a proposed permanent supported housing development. So I just want to also highlight that we want to continue this coordination to make sure that we are understanding where there can be barriers that restrict housing for people experiencing homelessness, and we want to continue that collaboration. Now, for expanded opportunities, let me bring two quick examples. One has already been mentioned by my colleague, Director Johnson and Councilmember Ward, around disaster recovery. And we need to continue to explore models and feasibility of providing enhanced case management services of longer duration focused on post-disaster housing needs. This regional center model that I think we've seen firsthand recently after the floods, and can work quite well if we continue to work together, many of the agencies and departments here in situations of disaster recovery. And the second is, I see this focus also on reviewing, regulating, enforcement, the implementation of every single housing element, housing plan in the state of California. And with CalICH interagency scope, we want to make sure that we continue to have a new level, I would say, of technical assistance on homelessness to cities and counties in collaboration with other state departments, develop an interagency guide on actions that city governments can take to address homelessness, because this helps us in our monitoring and enforcement capacity, and it helps cities ensure that they know, best practices in order to advance solutions for their homeless population.
Thank you very much for those. Councilmember Damaros.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to commend the California Commission on Aging. They recently hosted a forum in conjunction with the C4A, which is the California Association of Area Agencies on Aging, at their annual meeting in Glendale. They put on a half-day seminar for about 400 people, focused on affordable housing, the crisis that no one is talking about related to older adults. They had Dr. Margot Cashel and a number of expert voices who are part of this work around the state, presenting to the area agencies on aging. And what we find is they term themselves social clinicians at the AAAs in our state. And so for many older adults who are precariously housed and are experiencing eviction or unable to pay for their rent any longer, the AAA is often the first place that they turn to, because they have not had any experience yet in the housing system, and they may not be familiar with the continuum of care work because this is a first-time experience for them. So we're really trying to beef up their expertise so they can be part of the network of first responders at the community level. So my thanks to the Commission on Aging, and as we look for people with lived experience, they're a wonderful bridge to older adults if we want to bring those perspectives in.
Thank you for that. And yeah, just as a call out, if there's anything that we or anyone on this call, right, can do to be helpful to provide the information for the AAAs, right, as they do act as the frontline response, that's the connecting that we're happy to do here as well. Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you. Two different lines of thought. I want to answer your question, and then just a broader as it relates to this conversation and the work of this council. So economic stability is housing stability. And obviously there's some intersection, but the heavier focus is obviously on health of all forms and housing. And I just want to add that I hope that we can see a significant increase in economic stability, and whether that includes long-term public benefits or actually helping people increase their income, which is tied to a variety of departments that are represented here. I think that the economic stability part of it needs to be lifted up more often, and there needs to be more intentional conversation around that, because literally economic stability is housing stability for all populations, and it means different things and how you achieve that. But I haven't heard enough about that, so I just want to say that. But this discussion around interagency coordination and collaboration, while all 4 points are important, this is the cornerstone of this council, and one of the reasons I was most excited to be a part of it. And so a couple of things come to mind as we talk about this. One, 49-page report with from all the different departments that covers, I'm sure, a span of discussions 1, 2, 3, and 4 is to some extent helpful. But for me, there should be a little bit more structure in terms of how this body is assessing how we're moving forward as a body in terms of coordination. So hearing all these different things are wonderful. And thank you to each of the department heads and secretaries for being willing to work alongside colleagues in other departments and other agencies. But I don't know if we continue in this vein, right, where it's reports and it's a 49-page report, how are we going to ever measure whether or not one of the main reasons this body was put together to coordinate and have an interagency approach, how are we going to measure that? And so I know we don't have a lot of time, we're time stretched today, but I would love to have a conversation around what's the next step for this, right? As opposed to individual reports. Is there a matrix that we're going to look at? Like, how are we going to measure movement along? Before we were together as a council, these things were happening, but now as a result of the conversations, the committees, the work groups, the public input, our discussions in this body, the needle has moved. That's not clear to me. And I think that it's a disservice for us to come together 4 times a year and all that heavy lifting that you all are doing, if we can at some point have some type of structure to understand what that looks like. And so I'll volunteer to support that thinking if I need to, but I feel like we this is great. And I think we need to continue to think about how we structure these conversations, or at least aggregately look at how the council is doing, right? And then the other thing I want to say, in terms of coordination and collaboration, obviously part of that is to look at the aligned programs that are very similar in terms of scope and service and outcome, the redundancies, most importantly, the contradictory policies across our respective agencies on these councils. And same thing, right? I'm interested to understand how we are going to start to do that part of it. And it's a lot of different programs, lots of different agencies. And so I'm not naive enough to think that's something that can happen even in a 6-month period or maybe even a year. But I would love to start to have some conversation or semblance of a direction of us getting to that, or figuring out how we start to get to that. So that, again, for people, which there's a lot of crossover, as we know, our populations are touching multiple systems, multiple departments. And I've expressed, the public has expressed, some of our department heads have expressed, we know that sometimes the policies contradict one another and they are within state control. And so I hope that we can get to a point of having that conversation as well, in addition to aligning and coordinating and figure out hopefully co-location and maybe a client flow between agencies. There's still some things that are happening that are contradictory. And so I hope that at some point that can be a part of what's added to the action plan in response to your direct question.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. And definitely happy to take you up on the offer to help think about that concrete measurement, right, as we think about the action plan and ways to strengthen it. Councilmember Moss, and then we'll take the rest of the hands that are up currently, and then we will move to the next discussion. I hate to cut us off, but I want us to make sure that we get to the other ones as well.
Thank you, Cody. I just want to acknowledge Councilmember Lewis and how much resonance many of her comments I have, particularly around the goal setting. It's been incredible to hear how many wonderful activities are happening within the departments and agencies, and frankly, in partnership with each other. But I think we're still missing the goal setting, that the cumulative actions across the action plan actually lead up to demonstrative impact on homelessness. So I too am willing to think through how we do that goal setting. But I had 2 comments I wanted to make. As I was listening to the conversation, there's a parallel that I wanted to share with my colleagues about where I've seen state leadership do such extraordinary work when there is coordination and alignment. And it really is around some of the work around climate. Like, our governor set these really important targets around carbon emissions, and how then all of our state agencies and departments organized goals and a timeline, and an entire apparatus was mobilized to really think about how do we address these targets as a state, and frankly lead the nation around how state leadership, resources, political will, all of the assets that we all bring can lead to significant reductions in our carbon footprint. And so I think it's analogous to homelessness, right? It is one of the most primary issues that our state is facing. And so I'm offering that as an example of how we might think about really systematizing and organizing some of our collective efforts towards some specific goals that help local jurisdictions really enhance their impact on the ground. And then the second was really thinking about, Secretary Castro Ramirez was talking about the amazing work in the Homelessness Connect piece in LA. And I was thinking, Cody, as you highlighted some of the tribal communities' concerns, it'd be really interesting to think about a pilot that's very much like the Homelessness Connect model for tribal communities, where those immediate needs are being met, and we have access to all of the state agency resources targeted particularly at our tribal partners. And so I think just thinking about how we get some economies of scale for our collective efforts that we're already using. And frankly, when you put some of those programs and services in communities that are smaller, the impact is much greater. So just a plug for maybe we think about if that pilot moves forward, doing the next round in partnership with our tribal leaders.
Great, thank you for that. Councilmember Ron O'Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Cody. So obviously all the great comments from my fellow council members absolutely are resonating with me. So one of the area I really think about is our homeless prevention strategies across the board. So public higher education has an important role to play there, and there's dedicated resources, right, to support our students and really to support them change their trajectory, right, into social and economic mobility in terms of advancement. So we really want to, this is an open invitation for some strategic conversations across this council to kind of think about how we can play a important role in advancing that strategy at the state level. So I just want to make that offer. And then I really think about, at least at the community college space, you know, housing is still very nascent for us. So when we're thinking about program design and specifically in the local implementation piece, very often our community colleges are encountering challenges in collaborating or finding entry points at the local level with kind of some of the continuum of care or just even understanding the funding eligibility landscape in terms of how to better support our students, right? They're students in our community college system, but they're members in other, right, in other systems, and they're just community members. How do we really think about taking more of a member-centered or student-centered, user-centered, right, whatever you call that approach, to really help them navigate through this complex process and varying processes that are involved in different systems? How do we kind of alleviate the friction points so there's really a no wrong door approach, right? Doesn't matter this individual, however, right, the initial entry point he or she chooses to enter, right, the process will be similar or the same, or really there isn't a lot of administrative burden. So how do we focus on that? I think is something that I'm very interested in continuing the conversation around. And then also I think local collaboration, right? Because I think about all of our agencies and organizations, how we structure, it's very much vertical, right? We provide our money and the money goes into the local level and through our, right, organizations, and it gets kind of, right, it gets processed or it's supporting our respective, right, target population. But how do we make sure all of our intended goals are maximized also at the same way at the local level? Because now you have a lot more players in the conversation. How do we actually build that network to support, right, the end users is something that I'm very interested in.
Thank you. And Councilmember Johnson Hall.
Good afternoon, everyone. I love this discussion and I'm very happy to be a part of it. I wanted to share with the group that very recently CalHFA approved an additional $50 million for the extension of the National Mortgage Settlement Counseling Program that happened just last week. And that didn't happen in a vacuum. There were a lot of folks who were on the line who provided really great input, including but not limited to, you know, Dashika with Crema, I mean, as well as Sasha Kurgan, she's not on the line. And of course, having the vote from Secretary Castro Ramirez, as well as Director Velasquez, that wasn't bad at all. That actually helped. And having that support to get it over the line. I'll point out that this will allow us to improve access and education and opportunities for people who are at risk. It does very poignantly speak to homeless prevention. But one other very important aspect of this work are the organizations that are charged with delivering these programs. That's who are also being supported through this NMS program, which we have touched upon, various speakers have already touched upon, but that's a very important aspect of making sure that this money of this type gets touched by the very all folks who are experiencing challenges within the spectrum. So that's all I have to share.
Thank you very much for that. And Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Thank you, Cody. Just a few quick remarks here. First of all, thank you all so much for providing some very clear examples of the level of coordination, collaboration that is taking place, and also providing the impact, right, as a result of the collaboration and coordination, those outcomes and the impact that that you're all having, right, in terms of preventing, addressing, and ending homelessness. I want to go back to the points maybe raised with regard to the point that Cody mentioned as he was going through the slide deck, that stakeholders were reporting to us a perceived need for purposeful and visible coordination, right? And I think what resonated with me as I was listening to all of the good work that is happening across our state entities and the way that we're partnering and collaborating, what resonated with me was this point that Veronica, Councilmember Lewis brought up, and also was reinforced by Councilmember Moss, which is how do we begin to speak to the collective impact that we're having? And we are doing a lot of good work, and we're measuring our programs and the success of those programs and measuring those outcomes. But I think we're at a point now that we have this statewide action plan as a foundation to move to the next level. So we have, let's just say, 150 different activities that are taking place. Can we now move to the level of identifying those sort of core collective impact activities that allow for us to have some data, to have a baseline, and then on an annual basis begin to assess whether we're making progress. And I do think that this is where the council's at this point, right? First, it was laying the vision, the action plan, the 5 action areas, developing the rhythm and the process here for reporting out and reporting up and lifting up the good work that is taking place. What I would propose, for the council, with, of course, support from our new executive officer, Megan Marshall, is for staff to come back to this council and to engage. Several of you have raised your hand and said, I want to be part of this conversation. And I also recognize that the advisory committee has been also providing a level of input to help inform. But I'd like to propose, Megan, that we take the input and the feedback received and come back with a way of more clearly and more visibly, I guess, and it may also be visual, right? How are we presenting this information visually to the people we're serving? Not just a 50-page report, but also, is there a way for us to provide visuals that enable us to present the progress that we're making, and also to draw attention to where we're not making much progress, and then to try to figure out what's, why is that happening? I do think it's very difficult for us to do that currently as a collective. I think we can do it program by program, but we need to get to the next stage of this. So I'd like to ask Megan to come back with a set of recommendations to work with you, of course, Cody and the Chica, and to come back with some recommendations in terms of how do we move to the next level. And then the final point that I will make, and hopefully we can have further conversation on coordination and collaboration during the item that Helene will be presenting, because we have an opportunity through this engagement with USICH and the execution of this MOU to now engage with 19 federal agencies to accelerate the work that we're doing to address homelessness. And I think in that sort of process and that exercise, that, also can be very helpful, right, in trying to crystallize our collective impact now, not just only at the state level, but also maybe taking a look at the measurements that the USICH and the Biden-Harris administration through the All Inside initiative are using, right? There's been clarity around a 25% reduction over 2 years. And so can we as a state begin to think about some metrics that align to the work that you're all doing, and that also align to accountability that we're building into the programs that we're administering? So more to come there, but I do think that there's, of course, you all have demonstrated that there's a lot of good work happening across agencies. I would say that this is probably the most robust level of interagency partnership and collaboration is taking place. Health and housing and social services and housing. Councilmember Johnson, thank you for reminding us that it's not just in the health space, but there's a lot of good collaboration that is also happening in terms of aligning and bringing in the social services component as we provide housing supports and housing options. So thank you all for this conversation. I know we now move to the next question, Cody, so I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And, I will speak for myself and my team when I say that we are eager and happy to help us, like you said, move to that next level of assessing the progress that we are making as a collective. And I will just say that, this is one of the things that we are hoping, or that we have and are going to continue engaging the advisory committee on, right, is understanding like how do we really show that collective work that we're all doing across the action plan. But we will definitely take what we've heard here and think about how do we bring that back to something that's concrete. So really appreciate that call to action. So I will just say that we always knew that the first discussion area was going to take the longest because we are the interagency council. So it's okay that we spent a lot of time on that. I really appreciated the discussion. I know we have 3 more to talk through. So it's okay if those do not, meet the same exact amount of time that we spent on the first one. But want to see if folks have thoughts in these other 3 as well before we move on through the agenda. So I know it's hard to transition, so I'm just gonna do it. But the second discussion area, right, is around racial equity and tribal engagement. So we would love for folks to share relevant activities involving racial equity and tribal engagement that they have going on. And then we'll open it up to others to identify any opportunities for strengthened racial equity and tribal engagement work that could be reflected in the action plan. So I will once again share the discussion questions in the chat, and we can pull down that slide. I think I have it here. Great. Okay. All right, Councilmember Velasquez, I see your hand.
Yeah, I want to share the in relevant activities, one that we're very excited about. Of course, we learned a lot, which makes us excited about creating an opportunity for better outcomes in facilitating more housing opportunities in tribal communities. And that is as part of Home Key Round 1 and Round 2. We were able to, analyze everything that we've done around AB 1010 waivers and input listening sessions that we conducted through tribal consultation to get to the point where we now have a draft Home Key specific tribal notice of funding, which was presented at a series of stakeholder meetings to receive feedback and recommendations. The Home Key tribal team will continue to collaborate with tribal partners during the implementation of this new program, including, application development, creating boilerplates for all of the contracts that need to happen between the state and tribal communities, obviously technical assistance, will continue to be important. But this is something that, you know, it was important to take that step to do a program that was specifically designed with tribal law and the tribal and the flexibilities that come with serving a population that under the home key construct that needed to be tailored specifically for these communities. And in terms of the opportunities, well, formal government to government, you know, senior leadership and tribal leaders, consultations for all funding sources has been very enlightening for us, for HCD. The secretary actually participated in one of these meetings last week. And so that is something that I think every opportunity that we have as council members to engage in those types of, you know, government to government consultations is going to be very, very important to continue to tailor, just like we have in Homekey, our programs to meet their needs. And I just a shout out to Department of Social Services, because in these tribal consultations, we always get great input about, you know, just look at what, you know, the type of engagement and changes in guidelines and program requirements that DSSS has done for tribal communities. So just a shout out to our friends at DSSS for leading the way.
Yes, thank you very much. And we are on our team always fans of copying other people's work that we hear is effective and has high impact. So thank you for calling that out. Director Johnson, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that note, and just want to build on that. And I just want to really, again, appreciate our continued centering around addressing inequities, racial inequities, and leading there. It's a priority of the Department of Social Services, but also the California Health and Human Services agencies that we're looking at a racial equity lens in all that we do. So just again, real quick to build on Director Velasquez's note around tribal engagement, do want to absolutely appreciate the leadership of my team, inclusive of the Office of Tribal Assistance and our Housing and Homelessness Division, for our ability to really utilize that consultation process with tribes. And to Councilmember Lewis's point, that technical assistance, that engagement has led to 25 tribes and tribal organizations awarded $35 million in program funding from our set-asides in housing and homelessness. So there's the outcome, and we look forward to doing more in that space to be intentional. And I will just say to the broader conversation around racial equity, we obviously know the space that we work in related to housing has a long history, not only for tribes, but for many populations, especially the disparities we see with Black and African-American communities. And so for us, it's a space that we want to continue. We're right now in the process of developing our equity plans, kind of by division. Housing and homelessness is one, but it's a broader effort across our department that really is going to guide our priorities and our engagement with communities to look at both our policies, but also how we even develop them in the first place, how we design and co-create our programs, but being very intentional in having that data to really indicate what our successes are in addressing these disparities and disproportionalities. I want to just again lift up that as it relates to kind of the service provider provisions, the technical assistance component is key for us. It is sometimes hard to understand our government language. I think we can all appreciate that. And so really for us, both having intentional efforts to be simpler, but also that we have intentional technical assistance out there, helping people understand how to access the resources and investments going forward is a key part of the success. So appreciate, again, this intentional focus.
Wonderful, thank you for that. And Councilmember Lewis.
Yeah, thank you. It was great to hear those efforts in particular and some of the targeted initiatives to ensure that we incorporate our tribal communities. I guess for me, I want to, some of the same sentiments I think apply here, this area, so I won't repeat them, but you know, there's been a lot of work done on diversity, equity, and inclusion, et cetera, and there's some key functions that many of the government systems, you know, undergo, right? One or more. Part of it could just be looking at the data to see if there's disparities of representation and equities. Part of it obviously is looking at their policies with an equity frame or lens so that they can understand whether or not there's some unintended harm being done, et cetera. And so same concept, right? At some point, I don't know if the state has a tool, and I know there's a variety of services and programs that are happening across the respective council departments. Nevertheless, again, some of the stuff is pretty conceptualized. It's going to apply across the department. So does the state have something like that where should a department say we're ready to dive into this, either this part of it, again, looking at the data in a different way or looking at our policies, et cetera? Is the state providing tools like that to the respective department heads? And if not, maybe that's something that can come in a future iteration of the action plan to be something that can be developed or a part of the effort. I do know, obviously, I'm a part of the racial equity work group that's still forming as another arm or support to this council. But yeah, so if someone can answer that question, I would appreciate it. And if it doesn't exist, then I would suggest that in a future iteration of the action plan, that's something we potentially look at and think about.
I'll just quickly say that the department, I know many other departments on this line are part of the Government Alliance for Racial Equity, which has now changed its name. That used to be GARE, but specifically looking at the tools, to your point, Councilmember Lewis, that government should be using to apply to policies. And that's absolutely a toolkit that I know many of us utilize, and more departments are joining that cohort. I also just want to lift up here, again, the governor's directive to departments here as it relates to the Racial Equity Commission that will be soon established, that we are to actually be very clear about creating plans to address disparity and disproportionality. So I'll put that in the chat just for everyone's benefit, to the link to that. So the Racial Equity Commission is intended to help advise state governments on some of these components. So I think that's very central to your question, Councilmember Lewis. Others might have more.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Thanks for sharing that.
And if I may, so the recent legislation under AB 977 requires all state-funded programs meant to address housing and homelessness be entered into HMIS. And so Cal ICH is working now to reach out to council member departments that were either specifically called out in that legislation or may be impacted by that legislation to begin coordinating the inclusion of those programs into HMIS and helping provide technical assistance to those local jurisdictions who will ultimately be the ones who incorporate that into their COC's HMIS, which ultimately will be fed into the state's HDIS. So lots of efforts underway in that area. And I think, certainly more than specifically around racial equity and inclusion, but just another opportunity for the state to coordinate amongst itself with regards to data.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think I lost the Zoom for a second. So I missed the last part of what Megan said, but I think maybe we can move on to the next hand. Someone tell me if that's not what's happening. I apologize. Great. I think I saw Councilmember Damaris's hand.
Yes, thank you, Cody, and you're right on track. I wanted to just take this opportunity. It may be insignificant in the voluminous work that's happening in the big dollar amounts, but tomorrow, the California Department of Aging welcomes our first tribal liaison ever, who will be working in our department, and she reports to our health equity officer, who also joined us this year. So this is very significant in our department in terms of advancing equity among older adults, people with disabilities, and family caregivers. And we're so excited for her to join us tomorrow, so we can work with everyone who's been named here.
Great, thank you. That's very exciting. Congratulations. And Councilmember Moss.
Just briefly, I think, this category is critically important, given who in fact is experiencing homelessness across the state. So I'm super psyched that it's prioritized here. Councilmember Johnson, I'm so excited to hear both about the executive directive as well as the fact that you all are already doing some of the planning efforts. I would just offer, I wonder if it could also be helpful to think about how locals get guidance around racial equity analysis and prioritization for doing racial equity analyses and targets of reducing racial disparities through funding. I do think it is possible to think about as the state agencies administer a myriad of funding, not just for homelessness, but across all of the state agencies and departments, how are we really thinking about the equity impacts, racial equity impacts that's happening on the ground, and how can we incentivize jurisdictions to really prioritize goal setting and plan development around reducing racial disparities, both in the programming that they're administering, as well as the revenue and resources that are that they're accessing. So just a piece there to tie those pieces together. I think it could be really helpful. Jurisdictions are looking for guidance around this issue, and I think the state can really provide some of that guidance.
Great, thank you for that. Any other thoughts about opportunities for strengthened racial equity and tribal engagement that we could reflect in the plan? Before we move to the next area. Yeah. Oh, Rohan, sorry.
Thanks, Cody. Building off this conversation, I'll just share to consider the recommendations coming from the State Reparations Task Force, another powerful body that's issued abundance of literature. And I think the question it poses is, how could Cal ICH help redress and repair intergenerational harm from redlining through more specific distributional equity and allocating resources? Tribal set-asides is one example, but given some of the populations that are disproportionately impacted, how could we intentionally close gaps? In public health, we do it for Black infant health and maternal mortality. We could also do it for housing and homelessness. So I think that's just another big body of work within California leading the way that we could borrow some recommendations from.
Thank you for that. Okay, I don't see any more hands. So I think we will move on to our third discussion area. And thank you, Claire, for sharing the slide to do the visual transition between discussions. So again, similar format. So would love for folks to share relevant activities around utilizing guidance from people with lived experience, right? This was our third area that we lifted up out of the feedback that we heard, was including people with lived experience in policymaking and program design. So would love for folks to share activities they have around that currently, or identify opportunities for increasing the guidance from people with lived experience in their work. Once again, I will put the questions into the chat. So would anyone like to share some relevant activities they have going around in this area? Yeah, Rohan, I see your hand.
Thanks, Cody. So from the Department of Public Health, we just wanted to share, we're so excited, we'll be launching an advisory board of people with recent or current experience with homelessness to serve in an advisory capacity to better inform public health interventions, not just around COVID-19 and other infectious diseases, but many of the other social drivers related to housing and homelessness. So thanks to Cal ACH for kind of leading the way. We're trying to adopt that within our own department's work as well. Also want to report back on some work we're proud of where we funded 16 different programs across the state to support peer health ambassadors. These are for people, by people experiencing homelessness. So recently in the Bayview Hunters Point region of San Francisco, we conducted over 1,000 surveys. This is while also offering vaccinations on site twice a week to people in the Tenderloin and South of Market district. And also in other parts of the state, like in Merced County, We're providing culturally responsive training for Latinos and Hmong populations as well. I think the spirit that this brings on topic number 3 is around trust and meeting people where they're at and letting them co-design the solutions. And it reminds me of one of Secretary Castro Ramirez's comments earlier on partnerships with the DMV to get people their identification and get them connected to vital benefits. It's all part of digital equity, meeting people where they're at, addressing barriers so all Californians can thrive and get what they need, similar to Councilmember DeMorris's comments on addressing and partnering with the area's agencies on aging, again, getting on the ground in communities to trusted partners. So I think that's the theme of trust and using some innovations of being in the field with technology to overcome barriers. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And we're excited to partner with you all on the Lived Experience Advisory Board work that you all are doing. Councilmember McGee.
Thank you. Excuse me, I'm squinting because I didn't realize how hard it was to get glasses. I went to an appointment to get glasses and it was so difficult. And so this light is really getting to me. I think that one of the things that we've done that has really been powerful for me is we've had listening sessions with young adults who are unhoused. And so when you talk about opportunities for guidance from people with lived experiences, children who are unhoused that are able to talk about their experiences and then let adults at a school site know what they need, the support they need, is very powerful. And so I'm proud of my team because we've tried to replicate this at the state level. And so our homeless education program does a lot with the students with lived experiences. And one of the things that they're very cognizant of is pre and post panel, correct? Because it's prepping a child. And I talk about children who are all the way up through 18 years old, right? And then it's also the post working with that child who shared their experience because of what they're sharing, triggers and things of that nature. And so I'm wondering what this looks like from an interagency standpoint. I appreciate Councilmember Lewis's comments about actionable, right? Goals and things like that. So my question is, how do we as an agency support, because education is often left out. We're left out of some funding things. We're left out of different things. So how do we support? And then as an agency, you all are talking with the Department of Education, talking with our unhoused program, and then we're connecting you all with our homeless education technical advisory centers in the various areas. One of the things that we did was we had a small listening session with some of the youth, and they were able to talk with my program, me as a director, and our deputy superintendent just about the struggles that they experienced, but also they gave us ideas on what they needed to really succeed and graduate. And one of the things that resonated was one of the youth said to us, like, you guys make these decisions and think they're going to work for us, but they don't. If you listen to us, then we could tell you what it is. So I'll wrap up with my comments of saying, how do we utilize youth in the school system? Because again, that youth is hopefully able to be with either their family, even if they're unhoused, which then gives us that familial aspect, everybody. Like, we're hearing from it, and then we're talking about all the different levels. So that's what I would say we've done, but then how we can really collaborate more is really doing this interagency connection so we can have those type of conversations.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. So for other folks, based on what you've heard, can you identify any opportunities for guidance from people with lived expertise that could be reflected in the action plan in your work, in our work as a collective? Any thoughts about how to do that interagency work Councilmember McGee was talking about. Or questions for the folks that shared. Yeah, Councilmember Damaris.
Sure, I'll uplift. We did a series of older adult behavioral health roundtables in April and May, and it was the objective was in the vastness of mental health and behavioral health to make sure that we heard from older adults. And in those settings, we were in Ukiah, San Bernardino, Fresno, and San Francisco. And in every setting, housing came up as a stressor. And many people talked about their family living situation. There were several examples of an older adult who is caring for an older disabled child. So maybe the child is in their 50s or 60s and the parent is in their 70s or 80s and very reliant on the older parent. And then also the topic of hoarding came up in all settings, and how that's is a cause for people to lose their housing or to be concerned about their housing. And I just want to commend the governor and Secretary Galley. In the May revise, there was an additional $50 million proposed for older adult behavioral health. And coming out of the pandemic, that is, there are serious concerns about isolation, social isolation, and this population in particular. So that is one example where the marquee was not housing, but housing came up repeatedly in all four settings by people with lived experience.
Thank you for sharing that. Councilmember Lewis.
I'll be brief, just to add a little bit more to what Councilmember McGee said. I think I would like to see, since the question is thinking about again, the future iteration of the action plan and the conversations we've already had around structuring and taking this to the next level. Like, I think that moving forward, there should be some type of understanding about what level of engagement each of the council departments have related to peace lived experience. Some have boards, which is obviously several steps in advance than others may be, but some may bring people in to just ask them what they think about policies that have been thrown out and everything in between. And so I think that it would be helpful at some point if we can understand what level of engagement, if any, each of the council or each of the departments and agencies represented here have. And then obviously, depending on what we find, additional supports can come thereafter. But I don't know that that's something that we're doing in this space. And I think it's important. And lived expertise, obviously people think about folks that are homeless or in recovery, formerly incarcerated, but there's given the broad stroke of all of the different services that are provided through these agencies and departments, it means a variety of different things. And I think it's important that we understand what that looks like.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And I'll just add really quickly, as I mentioned before, Cal ICH is working on starting up a lived experience advisory board to help provide guidance, right, to this council body as well. So that is something that we will have, you all will have access to that group, right, in getting their guidance and feedback on specific recommendations or policies or things going forward. So that's something that we're really looking forward to. And then also, Councilmember McGee, to your point, we are working on starting up a working group focused on youth and young adults. And so we'll definitely follow up with you and engage with you all on how do we utilize the existing structures, right, that you have or that folks at the community colleges have or other folks serving youth that already exist, right, to make sure that that work is well-rounded and includes all of your folks. So I'm going to move us to our last discussion area. Thank you all for remaining engaged and continuing this. This is really helpful. And I can see my staff taking notes and really getting excited about some of the things that we're talking about. So the last discussion area that came out of the feedback was around communications and public awareness. So as I mentioned before, right, people want to know what is the state doing They want to know what resources are available. They want to know how they connect, and they want to know what are the best practices, right? In many instances, I think sort of like we mentioned before as an example around racial equity, right? Like how can we all be using the best practices so that we're all moving in the same direction? So we'll do the same way for this last one, right? So would love folks to share relevant examples of increased communications and public awareness that they have going on. And then we'll open it up for others to identify opportunities for additional communications and public awareness that could be reflected in the plan. And so for the last time, I will share this in the chat. Great. So would anyone want to start sharing some relevant activities around communications and public awareness that they have going on?
If I may, so just wanted to share with the council and those in attendance that Cal ICH is doing some deep dives and digging into existing state infrastructures around boards, commissions, councils, et cetera, that have overlap or potential overlap with the focus of this council. So it's to sort of streamline and make more efficient those conversations and not to overexhaust stakeholders and asking them to participate in areas that might be duplicative or in some instances contrary to one another. To share that, and as well as sort of segueing then into discussion 4, very simple solutions, that we heard from our stakeholder listening sessions, including our tribal communities around state level coordination. So I have a team now who's working on identifying council member departments, public facing calendars where technical assistance is being offered or conversations with regards to specific programs, so that Cal ICH can host a centralized calendar of all state activities as it relates to housing and homelessness, so that our mutual stakeholders and grantees and partners, et cetera, can rely on a centralized location for all conversations regarding housing and homelessness.
Thanks for that, Megan. Councilmember Ron O'Shaughnessy.
So I was just kind of reflecting on this question and think about, the intended goal of the increased communications and public awareness. Like, who are we trying to make aware of? Like, are we talking about potential grantees for our funding, or making the general public aware of the services, right? So, and then the question is also then, is it the issue of communication, or how much efforts we can put in to remove the friction points in terms of application for the opportunities, right? So I think about one of the shifts that we are trying to make in terms of providing grants for our colleges, and we are kind of shifting from kind of the RFA process in a way that those colleges or districts with better grant writers and who are more in the know, right, or are on the listserv will get the information faster, and they know what we like, and they provide their grant application, tell great stories, and they end up getting the grants, right? Versus taking the approach of like really understanding who are the colleges that really need the support, who are the students, or where the students are that really require the support, and then give the funding to, so using data, using our system level data, and say, we have identified you, this college or X district or this region, right, to be the grantee of this funding opportunity. Now tell me where you are so we can provide differentiated support, so then you will make sure that you're successful. And through this kind of shifting approach, we have seen colleges and districts where typically they do not apply for it because they feel like they don't have the capacity to write a grant or answer to RFP. Now they have the opportunity to really build up the basic infrastructure, and at the end of the day, serving our students in the way we need them to, right? So we really kind of shifted how we approach where we provide resources to address some of the regional inequity and historic underinvestment in regions. So I have kind of thought about, just again, like how much of it is communication, telling people what we have and encourage them to apply, and then versus remove the administrative burdens and say, we see a need here, and let me help you and support you to provide the necessary infrastructure build out.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think to your question about, who is the audience for our public communications, I think for us, it is yes, right? It is both often. And I think makes it complicated to think through the different audiences, but definitely important. So thank you for bringing that up. Councilmember McGee.
Yeah, I wanted to put my hand down and let Councilmember Rohan go before me. I've been talking a lot, but no, this is an important conversation, because what I believe I just heard about the community colleges, like I'm gonna keep ringing the bell for California Department of Education, because we have the Homeless Education Technical Advisor Centers that provide support throughout the state. And so I think when we're talking about the increased communication, allow us to also support with that communication. I'll put my team out there, right? Like I believe I heard something earlier about, was it mortgage assistance? Did I hear that correctly? Did anybody else hear that? So I'm thinking of like, okay, whoa, if there's mortgage assistance, how do we get that information out to our families in the schools, right? Because we have families that are struggling. And so for those children who are vulnerable, and we've provided trust in our LEAs where they trust us enough to say, hey, I'm unhoused, I need support. For those homeless liaisons that are in the school districts and at the schools, they know our families that need that mortgage assistance. So I guess I'm saying it, and my team might get upset with me, so I'll have to bear that after this call, but let's send the Department of Education some of these things, and we can try and figure out, yeah, we can send this out, or we may respond back and say, no, this doesn't fit in, we don't have an avenue. But I'm wondering, Cody, with Councilmember Lewis is, I think I've been hearing her ring this bell, like, how do we make things more measurable? How are they not just saying, or how are we not just saying we're holding webinars or we're holding meetings, but what is the measurement of that? Because I held this webinar, we've seen a decrease in unhoused families. We've seen a decrease in our Black community, our Latino community, our Native American community being unhoused, or we're seeing more educational opportunities, the connection to higher education. So I guess let me go back to the question, because I love to talk. Getting back to that communication, send some stuff to us in the Department of Education, and then let my team grapple with how we can get that out. And then if we can't, we can either figure out other ways. And I think the last thing I'll say is, when I was a principal of middle school, it hurt because we had families living in the shelter. And some of our families, the children had mental health needs where they were acting out in the shelter, and it may have caused them to either be displaced, or maybe the family was in the shelter too long and they said, you have to move on to the next area. And when our families did trust us and we were doing an effective job, we had no response for them because we didn't have this connection. So that would be my other challenge to the council is, how do we work on just bolstering what we can do for each other as well? So we could pick up the call and I could say, hey, Claire, I'm dealing with this. What do you have? Or, Stephanie, what do you have that we can support the LEA? So that's the other thing I think we have to put in the action plan, Cody, is where we're also able to reach out and support each other.
That's great. Thank you so much. Dr. Radhakrishnan, I see your hand up.
Thanks. I'd like to build off Councilmember Lewis McGee's comments and Secretary Castro Ramirez. I think the issue of communications and awareness is so important. How can the public understand and appreciate the work of this body? How will they know if we move the needle? And what's the goal setting for California, as we're about to hear from our federal partners on something very specific, like a 25% reduction in 2 years? What is that for our various agencies, departments, and council overall? So I think Secretary Castro Ramirez said it. How do we move from 150 activities, which are more process measures, to outcome measures that are more person and community centered? My team recently met with UC Riverside Center for Social Innovation this week, and they have a model called DNA, which stands for data, narrative, and action. How can we, for every activity, succinctly articulate the data, the story, the narrative behind it, and the action steps that we're all taking, and maybe go from 150 activities and a 50-page action plan to 5 panels that are impact scorecards or impact storyboards that can help visualize the work that we're doing. So thanks.
Great, thank you for that. And yes, well, I just want to say that we, while this specific update to the plan may not change all of the outcome measures and all of the structural pieces of the plan, we are looking at that in the future. So all of this feedback is super helpful on that. So really appreciate that. Any last thoughts around this piece on communications and public awareness, ways to strengthen that area of the plan or use the plan to strengthen that work? All right. Seeing none, and having waited the requisite amount of time counting in my head to allow people to think, I will wrap us up with this agenda item. So just first of all, thank you all very much for that discussion. I know it's challenging to have real robust discussion over Zoom, but I really do appreciate that you all made that happen. And just appreciate all the ideas and the call to action that came out of this conversation, right? And I'm going to keep us moving so we can continue through our agenda, but just want to say that, this type of interagency discussion and thought partnership is really what makes this council so important. So we're excited to help follow up on these ideas to identify ways to move them all forward. So one last slide from me, I promise. Just going over some next steps really quickly. So as I mentioned, after this meeting, Cal ICH staff will follow up with council members, staff regarding the ideas brought up in these discussions and sort of help identify ways to move that work forward. And we'll come back at the next council meeting in September with an update on progress towards moving that work forward and sort of what came out of this discussion. We're also at the same time working with your staff to finalize the activities in the updated plan by July. We'll further refine activities and other elements of the plan's content in July and August as needed. As we mentioned, we're working with the advisory committee over the coming months to help them generate more formalized guidance around the 2 questions that Nicole mentioned earlier. And I know a few of those folks were listening in today, so just appreciate their partnership in this work. And last, the ultimate piece of this work is that we'll bring the updated action plan to the council for discussion and potential approval at our council meeting on September 7th, 2023. So with that, if there are no questions, I will keep us going.
Cody, not a question, just want to commend your leadership and the tremendous progress that we're making here. Thank you for facilitating today's conversation. Nicole, thank you as well. I think it was very helpful for us as council members to take a step back to focus on the key themes that came out as a result of a very robust public input process that also required, right, that you and Nicole and others that were part of this process be in listening mode. I think that we have a lot of great recommendations and ideas in terms of how to move forward. What I will just continue to impress upon the team, the staff team, is to help us prioritize. And I really appreciated the comments around reminding ourselves that the work that we're doing collectively, the way that we are speaking to that work, and also the language that we're using, right? And for those of us that are in state government, we tend to oftentimes use acronyms and bureaucratic speak. So also simplifying the way that we're communicating to ensure that the people that are not only the people that are intended to be served by these programs, but also the people in our community who are asking questions about what is state government doing as it relates to providing more services, more support, more health, more housing. We're doing a lot. I think we just need to find a way to be able to translate or to impart that information. But I do feel like we're on the right track. And as I know my colleague, Secretary Galley, is not part of this conversation right now. Corinne is here. We will follow up and circle back with you all, but very much appreciate the level of engagement, the level of insight, and also the recommendations that came out of a result of today's conversation. And I'm sure we're going to hear from the public also during the public comment phase of or the part of this agenda, because I'm sure that they also have some ideas for us to consider. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Secretary. So that is all that we have for this agenda item. And so to keep us moving, I will now pass it over to Helene Schneider, who will provide a federal update from our counterparts at the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. So Helene, thank you so much for joining us today and listening in, and take it away.
Great. Well, thank you for listening in. That was great. Fantastic conversation. I look forward to seeing it all get condensed and implemented. And that's, I think, what I'm able to share this afternoon. And I'll be relatively brief in order to leave time for questions and for public comment. Always feel free to reach out to me as well. But I think what the all inside is, as Secretary Castro Ramirez already alluded to, I'll talk mostly about really blends in nicely with implementing the action plan. And I think those two items should not be seen as two separate things, but integrated together. So if you can just go on to the next slide, just a couple of very brief updates. And of course, as you know and are aware, there's a lot of negotiations going on up on the Hill right now, dealing with debt limit and ceilings, and as it relates to budgets. It might have changed since we started this meeting, so I can tell you a couple of things that I know from now. But one of the things I did want to highlight that's on the USICH website is looking at all the different funding flexibilities and waivers that expired when the COVID public health emergency was rescinded nationally. We have been, the staff and the whole council has been tasked by the USICH Council to look at each of those items as they pertain to assisting people experiencing homelessness, to see what worked well and what could perhaps be continued into the future, as opposed to just closed up because the public emergency was removed. So that is in progress right now. It also lends very nicely to the all inside work that we're about to do. So there is a tool on our website. You can look at that. It goes by department about all the different types of things that were expiring because of that, if you wanted to take a look at that at the federal level. On to the next slide. When I sent the slides, and this was before any deals were made about debt, reductions and relief and so forth, but just to highlight and here, and just for the record, for your records, what is in President Biden's draft and proposed budget for 2024, significant funding related to housing and homelessness and healthcare connections as well. One in particular into the next slide that I really wanted to highlight, and it also relates to the philosophy of housing being a human right and finding a way that everyone has a safe place to place their head down each and every night, which is on the next slide, is a proposal of creating a housing voucher guarantee for youth aging out of foster care and for extremely low income veterans. So it would become basically, a mandate for anyone in those categories to be able to get a housing voucher if they need one, as opposed to the lottery system or the waiting list or other things that we see now in the housing vouchers. Whether or not that becomes law at the federal level, as you know very well through your own state process, there's proposals, and then there's legislation, and then there's budget in action. But I wanted to highlight that one particular proposal from the Biden administration. And then getting to the real meat of what I wanted to talk about with you this afternoon, which is about addressing unsheltered homelessness, and which is on the next slide. I had the opportunity, and I want to just commend and thank Dashika Wakima and Secretary Castro Ramirez for, I got to attend 2 of the 4 Mobile Homeless Connect events. You'll see Dashika in the blue there with the mic. This was at the LA Grand as people were coming together, learning about what the day was going to look like. That was very early in the morning. Fantastic events. I was engaged and involved, and still am engaged and involved with trying to see how we can better implement and work with Social Security on getting that type of information and documentation to people experiencing homelessness who need that work, who need those documents in terms of getting access to housing. Also that same day at the LA Grand, later on that day I had the opportunity, I wanted to highlight just a very big progress happening in Los Angeles at the LA VA Medical Center, the ribbon cutting there, and Secretary McDonough, who is chair of our USICH Council, was able to be there at the ribbon cutting itself. There's more all over the state that's happening, but sometimes we really do need to acknowledge and celebrate those events when they occur. And so I just wanted to acknowledge those two things, but really wanted to talk about All Inside and give you a better picture of what's happening. It's just been launched. As Secretary Castro Ramirez said, there's a lot more that still need to happen. Things are in movement. We'll have a lot more, detailed information, but a lot of it is going to be connecting with all of you on the council. This is not just a housing issue. It's not just a healthcare issue. This is an all hands-on approach. Full on, every council member will have some engagement in some capacity, just like at the federal level, all 19 federal agencies are working on this. So as was mentioned, in December of 2022, USICH, we released All In, which is our federal strategic plan to prevent and end homelessness, as was mentioned, with this ambitious, but we think attainable goal of reducing homelessness by 25% by 2025. Very ambitious goal, but we think it is possible. Can't do it without the state of California for sure, and your partnership. The plan also focuses on homelessness prevention, right? Because we know to end homelessness, we must not only help people who are homeless become housed, but also prevent people from falling into homelessness. And that is a part of the bigger all-in federal strategic plan. We also know we cannot meaningfully address our nation's homelessness problem without a distinct focus on unsheltered homelessness, which is why on May 18th, we launched what we call now All Inside, which is a new place-based initiative, which is focused on getting people off the street and into housing. Through this initiative, USICH, each of the 19 federal agencies are partnering with state and local governments to strengthen and accelerate local efforts to get unsheltered people into homes in 6 locations. And these 6 locations account for more than half of the nation's unsheltered population. So the locations are Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, the Phoenix metro area, mostly Maricopa County, Seattle, and then the state of California. The kickoff that we had included comments from Ambassador Susan Rice and VA Secretary and our Chair McDonough, and our USICH Executive Director Jeff Olivet, and a representative from each of the 6 communities, including Secretary Castro Ramirez. You did a great job during that session. That was very official looking at the White House, this virtually coming in with people there in DC and everyone else being piped in from around the country. We wanted to reiterate President Biden's firm belief that everyone deserves a safe, decent, and affordable place to live. He is committed to achieving that. And so All Inside will offer innovative and technical and tailored support, as was mentioned, for up to 2 years. A big part of that is bringing in a full-time person, a federal employee in each community. So one full-time employee for each of the 6 areas to accelerate locally driven strategies and enact system-level changes specifically on unsheltered homelessness. It also means we want to deploy dedicated teams across the federal government to identify other opportunities for regulatory relief, flexibilities, navigating federal funding streams, facilitate peer learning network across communities, and also look at over the 2 years how to convene philanthropy, the private sector, and other communities to identify opportunities for follow-on support and collaboration. So as I mentioned, this is a multi-jurisdictional, all-hands-on approach. So some examples on the big picture here before I get to the state of California of how some of the different 19 federal agencies are working on this include things like how HHS, Department of Health and Human Services, providing technical assistance to help communities leverage federal programs, in our case, like CalAIM, right? Or provide housing-related support services and behavioral health care. HUD and the VA and Social Security Administration with HHS will work together on collaborating to address barriers that people may encounter when obtaining various forms of government-issued identification and other critical documents. The work that we've already been doing with Mobile Homeless Connect really was a preamble to this, and those conversations are still happening because those barriers certainly exist there. Also looking at other data sharing opportunities and regulatory flexibilities within Social Security that still protect people's personal information. The Department of Labor is looking at how to connect communities with local workforce boards and Job Corps sites to fully leverage local and state government employment opportunities for unsheltered youth. FEMA is looking at providing technical assistance to communities to facilitate greater operational coordination in response to disasters, which often increase homelessness. And others like AmeriCorps, the General Services Administration, Department of Ag, Energy, Justice, Transportation, Treasury, all have made specific commitments related to this all inside community initiative in each community. So as Secretary Castro Ramirez said, we are partnering together, federal and state, to jointly work on reducing unsheltered homelessness and we want to execute a strategy which will be a determination of goals and policy efforts. And this is, again, as we just heard from all of you, this robust discussion you had with your action plan. Certainly this can lend itself into that progress as well. The strategy we want to, as I mentioned, will have a full-time federal team lead who will partner with other federal community partners with your agencies. Secretary Castro Ramirez's office is hosting this position. We are finalizing the recruitment process of that. We can have an announcement soon of all of our communities very soon in the next few weeks. And so stay tuned for that information. We mentioned talking about looking at our regulatory relief and flexibility, data collection and analytics support of how to utilize and analyze all available data to get information to communities faster. What kind of convenings can we put together at the state level, at the local level? How do federal agencies work on that? How does this work in terms of collaboration? One of the items you just talked about with your federal strategic plan. And specifically for the state of California, we're taking this people-based approach of focusing on three distinct subpopulations: veterans, older adults, and youth. And I think that will really help us be accountable for the results. It will help us kind of shape in terms of looking at, instead of looking at all unsheltered homelessness in every single way, focusing on these three populations, we think we can see what best practices can come up, which will certainly help other populations down the road, and also connect with us in local communities on what they're doing in those populations. So providing TA across areas like Medicaid reimbursement, looking at another highlight of creating regulatory flexibility for coordination of bringing together project-based vouchers or coordination of excess state properties, things like that. We mentioned already documentation concerns and getting them more expedited process ways so people can get in access and eligible for housing. And then how do we do all this, collaborating with all the state agencies and our federal partners, and then supporting local efforts across the state to advance these priorities. Certainly, as I mentioned, Los Angeles is also one of the communities, and they have their own set of priorities, but there'll certainly be some combination and connection between Los Angeles and the state, and how that then can also relate to other communities throughout the state of California. My role as a senior regional advisor, I'll certainly be connected with the federal team lead, who will be the full-time person connecting with the state agencies. And I can also certainly assist, because I'll also be doing the same thing with the Los Angeles full-time federal team lead. So there's a lot of interconnectivity happening there. So stay tuned for more information. I know that was a lot in a short period of time. This is how you can get a hold of me on this slide, but I'll be back, as they say, and but really want to open it up for questions, and wanted to make sure we had enough time for public comment before this meeting was over in half an hour. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Helene. Any questions?
I know that was a lot. And I'm, from the East Coast originally, so I talk fast. So if you need me to reiterate something, please, but I see a lot of you on the council there that I can just imagine. I will say, stay tuned for getting an invitation. I'm sure when we get this full-time federal team lead together to meet, we'll want that person to hear from you for sure.
Helene, thank you. Thank you for the report. And thank you again for lifting up the Mobile Homeless Connect pilot in LA. And of course, kudos to our Deputy Secretary for Homelessness, Takshika Wikrema, who's integral part of the overall coordination of this 4-week-long pilot that was hosted really by the City of LA, the County of LA, LASA, and several nonprofit organizations. Again, also kudos to Cal OES, Director Ward. Your team was incredible, help assisting with the logistics, assisting with the coordination, and several other council departments that are represented today. So also reminder, when you share that picture of so many of the people that were part of this effort, I think it's a reminder that going back to the conversation we were having in terms of communication and in terms of awareness, that we need to continue to lift up, right, the work that is taking place in community and think about visual representations, right, of the work that is taking place. So thank you, Helene, for including Mobile Homeless Connect in your report, and also appreciated the help with the Office of Social Security. For the first time, this Mobile Homeless Connect Pilot 2.0 included federal representation with Social Security Administration at the table. And we look forward, of course, now with the engagement on the All Inside initiative to be able to bring other federal entities on board. The last thing that I will just mention is the governor is very eager and excited to move to the next phase of this engagement. I mentioned in my opening remarks that we have entered into a memorandum of understanding that lays out the commitment that we have to this collaborative effort, as Helene mentioned, to move more quickly, to accelerate our efforts to get unhoused people into homes and to provide the level of support and access to resources that are necessary to ensure greater stability. And that includes also thinking through some of the other connections that were brought up during today's conversation, connection to jobs and economic and health, well-being, et cetera. So as we move into this next phase of our engagement, we will be very much focusing on the 3 populations, veterans, youth, and older adults, and engaging you all in helping us to think through where you all see an opportunity for our federal counterparts to be able to lend not just additional support, but if there is a need for greater flexibility, if there are sort of creative, innovative approaches that you all have been contemplating, well, we have a seat at the table with the USICH, and we have a seat at the table with these 19 federal agencies that will be part of this initiative. We are very much in the early stages of mapping out the work plan. And so we expect to be able to have more details, hopefully in the next 60 days or so. And Dakshika Wikrema and our team will continue to be a point person on this, of course, working closely with Megan Marshall and the Cal ICH team. So again, excited to work with the Biden-Harris administration, and looking forward to what more we will be able to accomplish with our partners at the federal level.
Thank you. Thank you both for that information. And since we are out of time for this agenda item, If anyone else has any questions or comments, you can send them to us, and we can help direct them to the right place and get some more information for you. But looking forward to hearing more. So now I will turn it to Giselle Sanchez to facilitate public comment.
All right. We will now accept general public comments. We have seen a few hands pop up during the meeting, so we thank you for your patience. As a reminder, to ensure that everybody is given a chance to speak who would like to, we will allow for a maximum of 2 minutes for each comment. Our team will put up a 2-minute timer up on the screen to warn you and warn you when you have run out of time. We welcome all comments and feedback. However, due to the structure of this meeting, we are unable to respond to them. For any reason, if you have any specific questions that you'd like answered, please email us at calich@bcsh.ca.gov. I'll also note that we received one public comment from the director of the Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority, which will be sent to our council members following this meeting and will also be available upon request. If you're connected through Zoom, please select the raised hand icon in the meeting window of your computer, and we will allow you to unmute yourself. For those joining us by telephone, you may press *9 to indicate you'd like to comment. And then you would also be instructed to unmute yourself, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Claire, if you could put up a timer on the screen. We currently have 7 hands raised. We'll start with Jerry Lalonde Burge. All right, you should be able to voice
Thank
your
you.
comment.
Thank you. This is Jerry Lalondeberg. I live in Petaluma in Sonoma County. My comments are focused primarily on the action plan. First of all, I want to thank the Governor Newsom and the Newsom administration for 2 major action plans that I want to try to link today. First of all, the action plan on homelessness, and secondly, the master plan on aging. Most of us on this call know that elder homelessness is going up in the point in time, and it's going to continue to go up as the baby boomers age. So we just, I really appreciate that we've linked those 2 things. And I would like the updated version of the action plan to more explicitly cite the various aspects of the master plan on aging. In the interest of time, I'll just give you 3 citations. So first of all, in action area number 1, objective 3, number 11, action area number 4, objective 12, number 6, and action area number 5, objective 15, number 5. All of those reference seniors and disabilities. So I hope that you can increase and basically put the plan side by side and pull together the different departments. I sincerely appreciate those citations. And as usual, I will pull up shared housing. Shared housing for elders as well as for people who need affordable housing is a real solution. So the shared housing providers in California would be a great benefit to everybody on this. And as Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez said, these should be high priority goals. And I appreciate all of the work that you all have done here today and throughout this time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next, Elizabeth Stone. You may voice your comment.
Hi, thank you so much. I guess I have.
Elizabeth, are you there?
Oh, okay. I unmuted on one part, but not the other part. Sorry. Okay. Hi. I'm calling in as a person with lived expertise of both having been unhoused with my children as well as extensive time in the behavioral health care system, as well as graduate training in a variety of capacities. I run a peer-directed service and advocacy organization in Ventura County and am a current recipient of funding from our CRC for incorporating people with lived expertise in the planning process, as well as some of the new funding for expanding peer-operated capacity organizations from the Department of Healthcare Services. I'm really excited and glad to see the increased emphasis on incorporating people with lived expertise. And a lot of my kind of academic knowledge of this comes from international published peer-reviewed studies. it's really not enough just to have listening sessions and kind of pat people on the head and say, thank you for your opinion, you know, and then we'll incorporate it into what we do. It's really important that you have people on your staffs at all of these agencies. You know, you guys are leaders in agencies across the state. Where are the people with lived expertise in your agencies? And what's happening with the stigma that people can't be out about that when they're applying for state level jobs? What we really find is that we would ask very different questions than people that don't share our experiences, our life experiences. So our input is really needed much earlier in the process. As I really highlight to Councilperson Lewis, yes, performance outcome data, but we need to be incorporated in deciding what those outcomes look like. You know, thank you so much for considering that.
Thank you for your comment. Right, next we have Annalie Trujillo. You may voice your comment.
Hi, my name is Annalie Trujillo, and I'm with the Paula Housing Resource Center, Paula Band of Mission Indians. We're located in Southern California. California has 110 federally recognized tribes, and 32 of those are in our area. First, I want to commend you all for your hard work, and to Secretary Castro Ramirez, who recently visited our reservation. I want to thank you as well. I want to talk about the racial equity and tribal engagement. Up until recently, we have not had much consultation, and that consultation hasn't been successful in reaching the tribal needs. The more barriers that we brought to light, the more barriers we have discovered when it comes to the tribal set-asides or programs, tribal specific. I hear a lot about like we're making progress with the tribes. However, there's not really been that much progress that was made. I know we're on the right step. Tribal engagement is really important. Bringing the tribes to the front when it comes to talking about tribal issues or participating in these tribal programs, it would be a key factor, strengthening by true tribal engagement. It's really important for us because we're the ones that are expertise with our tribal communities, and we're not being represented. We're not at the table, and we're not being able to talk about our specific issues across the board. We would really like you to use us and use our input so we can help our tribes across California. Another part of it is HMIS. It does not work for tribes. The tribe needs to be more involved in that. And we have pretty much like our own data as well that's not considered. There's been missed opportunities due to capacity and deadline dates and trying to get these programs to work for tribes that don't work for tribes. There was $85 million left on the table for tribal set-asides, and I think that we can all do better than that. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right, next, Marty Otomoto. You may voice your comment.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me, but my name is Marty Omoto. I am a older adult. I'm almost 70, and I'm a parent of a 30-year-old person with Down syndrome who lives with me, and also a sibling of a person with developmental disabilities. First of all, you all should get some coffee after this meeting. You're doing wonderful work, and I just want you to know that we out here deeply appreciate the work that you all are doing. I want to underscore something that Susan mentioned about the C4As, the Area Agencies on Aging, and connecting with them on the issue of housing and homelessness. It is another reminder that we got to reach out to the agencies that are on the front lines to help our communities understand how to find resources. On the issue that Rome was talking about, how do you measure progress? I do think we need to go back to the whole person-centered approach to looking at needs and then tying that to outcomes, and not just look at just utilization information. Lastly, I want to also urge the council to really look at ways to how to include the agencies that are missing from this council, like the Department of Developmental Services. How they are not on this council mystifies me because they serve 350,000 people with developmental disabilities. By the way, many of those people are at risk of losing their homes or constantly at risk of losing their homes. They don't, if you're older and you're trying to find a home, you don't have credit and you can't get into a home. And that's a real life story. But beyond that, I want to thank all of you, Secretary Castro Ramirez. It matters that you and Dr. Galley are co-chairs of this committee. because it brings a significance and commitment that California has taken this seriously. And I appreciate the work that you, Secretary Ramirez, have done, and also all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Next, we have Shella Common Dumont. May voice your comment.
Good afternoon. My name is Shella Comine Dumont, and I am the parent of someone who has developmental disabilities. I'm also the executive director of Chance Housing. So my agency houses people, older Californians, people with disabilities, people that have behavioral health needs, families, youth, foster youth. We're actually on the front lines housing people. I wanted to thank you for this excellent meeting. It's been really enlightening. I've been engaged from the very beginning, and I've made a lot of notes, but I want to boil it down to three issues. The first is I was taking a look at the updated plan, and again, I actually didn't see anything where you were collecting homeless data or information from the Department of Developmental Services and including the needs of several 100,000 Californians with developmental disabilities in that action plan. The second is that I see a bit of a gap in the ICH providing guidance and support to align the housing strategies from its plan with the housing authorities so that they can include the initiatives in their annual housing plan updates. You know, for the special populations, there's really no way for the housing authorities to plan for, you know, what you've got in your ICH report, Master Plan for Aging, Whole Person Care, Developmental Services Task Force, CalAIM, Managed Care, Long-Term Care, and so forth. And the third and most important thing is that I want to remind you all that the housing that is being built for homeless populations, which is small studios, is not suitable for people who use wheelchairs and live with medical equipment. So those 6,000 units, we need accessible housing.
All right, thank you for your comment. Next we have Mimi Khalili. You may voice your comment.
Hi, my name is Mimi Khalili. I'm just here basically as somebody who also is speaking from lived experience. I was probably 6 years old when my parents split, and then my mom had to go come back to the US, and she, as an adult with developmental disabilities, had an incredibly difficult time trying to support two kids on her own. And I wanted to second Marty Emoto's mention of support for getting people with developmental disabilities voices at the table, because although my mom is not diagnosed with a developmental disability, she most certainly has felt the repercussions of it. She has trust issues just getting the diagnosis. That's part of the issue. But that we lived a life going from house to house trying to find some form of stable housing. We lived in a hotel for a week because a church was kind enough to fund that amount of money for us to live somewhere. So I just wanted to point that out. I also wanted to share that I think it's definitely important for the need for incorporating guidance for people who have a lived experience in all of the interagency council's work, because it's important to have the filter of those who are impacted, who are, you know, unsheltered, who are homeless, because if we don't have that filter in place for all the work, all the good work that we're all doing.
Mimi, if you could please wrap up your comment.
I'm so sorry. Yes, if we don't have if we don't have that filter in place, there could be much work that would be gone to waste.
by not accessing the information that we need from those folks with lived experience. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. We do have 4 more hands raised. So Noah Whittaker, Ludmilla Bade, Cindy Soto, and Gregory Fernan. All right, Noah, you may voice your comment.
Good afternoon, all. Noah Whittaker, Tulare County. My comment is actually quite simple, and that's in looking at the action plan and the update process, CSAC has also developed at home, and I would love to hear or see from ICH a response to that. And, you know, is it incorporating into the updated action plan? Is it completely ignoring the action of at home and the voice of the counties and the city jurisdictions? Where does it support? Where does it align? Where does it integrate? And where do they not align, so that we can track these differences? As a local level planner, at home is certainly at a forefront politically on our mind with our organizations, just like the action plan is. And if the two plans aren't integrated, it creates a lot of challenge at the local level, as we're now following potentially 2 different action strategies to affect change. And I would just love for that to be embraced in a more cohesive manner. So that's my comment. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate the work you all engage in.
Thank you for your comment. Ludmilla Bade, you may voice your comment.
Hello, Ludmilla Bade here. One of the things that we need to consider deeply, and that I am considering also deeply as I look at how to resolve homelessness, are what are the core issues causing homelessness? And I think as our understanding of homelessness and the people who are homeless increases, we will get more understanding of that. One of the issues that I don't hear spoken about enough is sustainability. There are issues around sustainability for individuals, and there's also systemic issues that have not supported sustainability, that have caused homelessness, that are contributing causes to homelessness. Anyways, one of the issues I want to talk about on resolving homelessness that I would love to see more included in the programs and more talked about broadly is Goal 8 from the United Nations Sustainability Goals. Goal 8 is decent work and economic growth. So I want to talk about income. Also paired with income is I would love to see more data about basic living expenses, including housing. Oh, so I'm about almost out of time. Okay, income things I would like to see are peer support and peer specialist and navigation training, environmental jobs, jobs in recycling and repurposing, and in housing construction. Those are some great areas where people could become involved and work and come up in the job market. Okay, I'll save my other comments for later or conversations. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. Next we have Cindy Soto. Should be able to voice your comment.
Hello, my name is Cindy Soto, and I chair the Personal Assistant Service Council for LA County. We oversee the in-home supportive services program for this county, and each county has their own public authority committee or commission that oversees in-home support services. And the pay that each county gives to the providers differs throughout the state. And the one reason we are in a provider shortage crisis right now, and that's for people that are housed. So I would say that some detail needs to be looked into for perhaps a different pay scale to help people that are unhoused because of the challenges that they will be facing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Gregory Fernan, you may voice your comment.
Thank you very much. My name is Gregory Farron. I'm from Sonoma County. I want to bring the group's attention to the federal legislation that's currently today being debated. The debt ceiling legislation contains a highly publicized cut, what they're calling a clawback of what they're identifying as CARES Act funding. Most of you know that most of the funding the state is using for Home Key and others, and a lot of counties and a lot of cities are using the ARPA funds, which is American Rescue Plan Act, and specifically the what's called SLIFLIF. The short of it is billions of dollars are going into our programs, which may be vulnerable if they aren't already by the entity obligated. The difference between obligated and expended, we all had till 2012 to obligate all of our allocations, but many counties and cities have not obligated all of their funding. They've kept a few billion aside, basically in case they need it. And I'm worried that those billions are going to be clawed back by the federal government in this legislation. So I'm sort of putting an alert out because I'm gathering the federal annual reports of all the cities and counties. And it looks to me like there's going to be some money that we will have to send back to the feds simply because our local boards of supervisors or cities or state have not obligated the entire amount that they received. I urge everyone to look to their counties and to the state to make sure we obligate it all before the deadline that Congress uses to determine how much they're going to claw back. Just an announcement of urgency. I'm worried about it. I think you should be too.
Thank you for your comment. And last we have Mariah McGill. Mariah, you can voice your comment.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mariah McGill, and I work with Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority. We're a tribally designated housing entity that works on behalf of 8 federally recognized tribes throughout the state of California. And I just wanted to thank everyone for speaking a bit about the things that they do with their organizations. But I did want to flag and highlight that these efforts and these successes were a long time coming. They did not happen in a vacuum, and they did not happen overnight. A lot of the success that you see at HCD and CDSS is because tribes pushed back, they partnered, they fought for what was not right and what wasn't going to fit in their communities, and they worked alongside program staff to ensure that there are equitable opportunities for tribes to be successful in these state programs. I want to applaud CDSS for being able to roll out the 17.5 million that opened up 3 separate programs to do at the tribal levels, and tribal HAP has been an incredible asset, and $20 million is simply just not enough. And Gustavo, thank you so much for round 3 of Home Key. We are going leaps and bounds. If you would have told me 5 years ago that we would have this opportunity to speak today, I'd be, you guys are crazy. There's no way tribes would have this opportunity to have funding. There's still much to do, right? We can pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, we've come a long ways, but there's still so much. There is an incredible need to have a tribal equity advisory committee. You need to have tribes at the table. There needs to be continued input, collaboration, and opportunities to discuss what is and what isn't working. For instance, HMIS and the connection to continuum of care. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. I appreciate it.
All right, seeing no more hands raised, I think we're going to go ahead and end this public comment. I'll turn it back to the co-chairs for any final remarks. We will start with Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Give me 1 second. Okay. Well, thank you. On behalf of Secretary Galley and myself, and of course the Cal ICH team, thank you to the council members, to each of you for your leadership, for your wise insights as we discussed the updates to the action plan. And Of course, I also want to acknowledge and recognize members of the public, tribal members that have joined us today to provide comments and also to provide and offer solutions, ideas and solutions that we should be considering as we continue the work of preventing and ending homelessness. I know we're at time. Cody, again, to you and Giselle, thank you so much for bringing us together. Great agenda, great facilitation. We look forward to seeing you all in about 2 to 3 months. In the meantime, we'll stay in touch with you in terms of the updates to the action plan. Thank you again. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Great. Well, thank you all. And with that, we will end the meeting. We really thank you all again for the robust discussion today. We really appreciate your ongoing commitment to this work and look forward to continuing to improve upon the good base that we've created. Also just want to echo Secretary Castro Ramirez's thanks for members of the public who joined us. And just note we had over 180 people listening in at one point, which is our most well-attended meeting to date. So appreciate everyone's engagement in this work. And with that, the meeting is adjourned at exactly 4 o'clock. So thank you for joining us. As always, our meeting materials are available on our council meetings webpage. To receive up-to-date information on the council's activities, please sign up on our email list. There's also a sign up option on the council's webpage for that list. And we hope to see you at the next meeting on September 7th, 2023. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Cody.